In the four corners of the Southwest, there is a business that supplies sand, rocks and boulders to business and residential landscapes. We have an Excel file that keeps track of the monthly sales by product. However, we have a separate worksheet for each of the four states. We need to create a pivot table to do some data analysis. But again, notice that this data is spread out in multiple worksheets. G'day, my name is Raphael and welcome to another edition of Excel in 365. In this video tutorial, I'll show you how to consolidate your data in order to create a pivot table report. I'll show you where to locate the PivotTable and PivotChart Wizard button, how to do multiple consolidation ranges, and finally put it all together in a pivot table report. One thing I would like to stress before I begin this exercise is that some people may recommend using the data model for this exercise. Others may suggest using Power Query. Although I could use any of these recommendations, the point of this tutorial is to A, demonstrate how to consolidate data, and B, the reason why I choose to use this option is because my format and setup in all four worksheets is identical. The data itself is different, but in all four worksheets, the format, the range, the column width, font, style, size, etc. is exactly the same. The first step in consolidating is to use the PivotTable and PivotChart Wizard, which ironically is not on the ribbon. We have two options. Option 1, find and add the button to the quick access toolbar. Option 2 is to use a keyboard shortcut. From the PivotTable and PivotChart Wizard, Step 1, where is the data that you want to analyze from multiple consolidation ranges? I'm creating a pivot table. Click Next. Step 2A, how many page fields do you want? Think of fields as the columns. Choosing to create a single page field for me is okay. However, my preference is to create my own fields. I'll come back and revisit this momentarily. Step 2B. This is where I need to select the data from each of the four worksheets. I'll start with the first worksheet and select the data range. I don't need the totals, but I do need the headers. Click Add and go to the next worksheet and select the next data range. Where it says how many page fields do you want, I'll select 1. Then where it says what item labels do you want each page field to use to identify the select data range, in field 1, I'll type Utah. Remember a few steps back where I said that I prefer to create my own fields? This is what I'm doing now. I'll show you where these fields appear on our pivot table. For field 2, I'll type Colorado. Field 3 is for Arizona. Field 4 is New Mexico. Click Next. In step 3, it asks where do we want to put the pivot table. I'll choose a new worksheet and click Finish. In a new worksheet, we have our pivot table as promised. Let's take a look at a few things. In our pivot table, we have our months and our products, boulders, rocks, and sand. To the right of the screen in the pivot table fields, I see that we have a field for row, column, value, and page 1. And none of this, of course, makes any sense to me right now. The other thing I don't see in my pivot table is where are my 4 states? Let's transform our pivot table. First, I'm going to move page field 1 field from the filters down to the rows. I see that page 1 field has something to do with my states. Who created these states, by the way? I did a few steps back when I was labeling each of my fields. Next, I'll go to the Design tab, and from the report layout, I'll select Show in Tabular Form. The default is typically compact form. The pivot table is starting to look a little bit better. Next, I need to rename these field headers. The field that says row, I'll change it to months. The field that says column, I'll change it to products. Page 1, I'll change it to states or whatever label you want. Now I can see that my pivot table fields makes a little more sense, especially as I will need to pivot the data in a moment. And there you have it. 4 worksheets have been consolidated to create one pivot table for data analysis. To do this, we used the PivotTable and PivotChart Wizard. We used multiple consolidation ranges and created new fields for the pivot table. And finally, we realigned the pivot table to make it look a bit more presentable. I hope this video was helpful. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment, question or concern below if you wish. And thanks for watching.